o'clock, folks. Committee members, please take your seats. First item up. I think my vice chair will be a little late. It's on. First thing, I want to go through, see who's on WebEx. For Connie. So if you do that.
Jordan Mahalahan, Matt Sterling, Michelle Segan, Debbie Beavers, Philip Bradley, Samantha Potter, Scott Berthold.
Thank you. You've got that, Connie? Thank you very much. First item, Vice Chair is here. Approval of the minutes for January 19th, 21st, 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. I have a motion to approve the minutes. I have a second from the Vice Chair. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, approve of the minutes, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Motion passes. Bill introductions. Representative Russman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a House concurrent resolution I'm submitting on behalf of a constituent. It's 21 RS 1486, and it deals with COVID-19 and vaccinations.
Thank you. Matt, do you have that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Without objection, it's admitted. Thank you. Other bill introductions. Bill introductions from audience. Seeing no bill introductions is closed. First up, we have a hearing on Senate Bill 126. Matt, if you'll give us an overview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. Senate Bill 126 would allow a Class A club licensee to host events during which the licensee could sell and serve alcoholic liquor for consumption on their licensed premises to individuals other than club members and their families and guests. So just so the committee is aware, a Class A club is for a premises that's a licensed premises that is operated as a nonprofit, social, fraternal, or war veterans club for the exclusive use of the members and their families and guests accompanying them. So under current law, a Class A club is allowed to sell and serve alcoholic liquor to members of the club and their family and those guests. The bill would allow that licensee to sell and serve alcoholic liquor to non-members during specified events. The bill would define those events as a function, celebration, or other event that was held on the licensed premises for a specified duration of time during which individuals who were not members of the licensee could enter and use the licensed premises pursuant to an agreement between the licensee and the contracting party. So in order for the law enforcement, the licensee would also be required to maintain all documents containing the agreements, receipts, and records of alcohol that was purchased for a period of 3 years and have those available for inspection by the director. And I'd be happy to try to answer questions that the committee might have.
Thank you. Questions for the reviser? Seeing none, we have a couple of opponents. First would be the distinguished senator from Johnson County and chairman of the Commerce Committee in the Senate, Senator Olson. Good morning, sir. Welcome to Federal and State Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been a long time since I've been in this room. 126 last year was 417. It kind of got caught up in the COVID. It passed out of the Senate. Let's see, it was 38-0 last year, and then died because of COVID. We didn't get to finish it. It just passed out of the Senate this year, 36-1. What the bill really does, with 48 hours notice, it'll allow, like the American Legions, they have, Julia Lynn started working on this last year. They have a big banquet hall in our area that could be used for wedding receptions and other kinds of receptions. This would allow them to sell the liquor in that reception area. So the theory is they'd hold more receptions and be able to have more revenue from that. As property taxes and values go up, we're losing the American Legions. We've lost veterans because of the World War II veterans and some of the wars they've passed, and so they're seeing a shrinking number of veterans to support these posts. So this is another way for them to increase their revenue, to be able to keep the post up for the veterans that have served in foreign wars. So there's about 270 posts across the state, but they're in a decline. I think gentleman from the American Legion's here, Robert Hall, he's probably going to give you more detail about it, but I reintroduced this bill trying to help them be able to sustain, their post and give the veterans a place to go. I think we owe it to them for their service and what they've done to try to help them in any way. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Questions of the conferee? Yes, Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, it's good to see you again. Under this law, would guests of the event happening be able to still bring in like BYOB, or to be limited just to purchase there at the facility?
I believe it would probably be purchased at the facility. I'd have to ask Matt on that, Matt Sterling. But my thinking is they would have to purchase it. And, what we're trying to do here is make these facilities more prosperous. I think right now they're probably not able to bring the liquor in.
Right. Matt, are you on the line?
Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman. So the bill would allow the licensee to offer for sale and serve that alcoholic liquor for consumption. But yeah, it would have to be something purchased by the licensee and on offer for sale.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions of the conferee? Seeing none, I'm sorry. Representative Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to make it clear, this is all on the same premises, say like the American Legion property there, nowhere else that's where this is taking place.
Yeah, it's what we have is they have a designated area for the veterans that they go. That's where they can drink. The building is tied to the same property. This would allow them to get a temporary permit 48 hours in advance. They would have to go to the ABC, do the paperwork to get the temporary permit for the hall. And it's, we're hoping that, they can pick up 30 or 40 events a year, maybe more at our hall, that helps them bring that additional revenue because they're declining in population. There's about 270 of these halls across the state, but they'd have to be adjacent, I'm guessing, so.
Senator, I know you have other things that you need to go in committee for. So I want to thank you for coming this morning.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Next up will be Robert Hall. He is on WebEx. Oh, I'm sorry. I have him on WebEx. Good morning, Mr. Hall, and welcome to Federal and State Affairs.
My name's Robert Hall, and I'm with the post in Olathe 153, and I was in the Army. The reason being that we want to get this bill through is that the American Legion post in the state of Kansas, VFW, Eagles, lodges, and different things have had real problems keeping their doors open. The city of Olathe, basically, the only one left is the American Legion. The rest have already had to sell off their buildings, and quite a few of them right now are having their meetings in our facility and events. Let's see here. I'm sorry. There's many other rooms and other availability, large rooms in the state of Kansas, but that are just like Olathe. They can't. They only availability for like events and weddings and stuff like that. In a lot of small towns are the fraternal organizations. And so I think it's important for them to keep them open. Over the past 10 years, the state of Kansas has closed down a lot of them for financial reasons. Now, due to the pandemic, due to the pandemic or the virus, organizations have financial problems and are trying to, and having a hard time keeping their doors open. And that's why I think that the SBA 26 should pass, because all we're trying to do is keep our doors open. Right now, our facility is losing about $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Of course, a lot of that's due to the COVID. But I'll take any questions right now.
Thank you very much. I just got a couple personal questions. What years were you in the Army?
Huh?
What
I
years?
was in from 70 to 73 in Germany. I was in the tank divisions.
All right, a tanker, huh? I was in 70. I went in 70. Didn't get out for a few more years, but so you were one of the tankers. Yeah. I always relied upon you for different things. But were you around the Fulda Gap?
Pardon?
Were you around the Fulda Gap in Germany or K-Town or?
I didn't hear you.
I said, where were you at in Germany? K-Town?
Bomb holder.
Bomb holder. Yeah. All right. Well, any other questions from the committee? This bill only, Matt, takes care of American Legions, is that correct? Or are there other fraternal organizations that could be also included?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not specific to the American Legion. It's for all Class A club licensees.
Thank you. Questions of the conferee? Seeing none. Thank you for coming here today.
Well, thank you for hearing me.
All right. I would advise the committee, I have Debbie Beavers. She did not submit testimony, but she is on for any questions. Debbie, are you on?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do we have questions of the Director of ABC? Yes, Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Debbie, what is the definition of a Class A club?
A Class A club is a private fraternal or veterans or benevolent organization.
So would the Knights of Columbus be a Class A club?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions of the Director? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am, please.
if I may, I would like to make a couple of points of clarification.
Please do.
This bill does not require a temporary permit to be obtained from ABC. It just requires notification at least 48 hours prior to the event. And to answer another question, any on-premise licensee, if they choose to, may allow a patron to bring their own bottle onto the premises. That is up to the licensee.
Thank you. Is there a fee to get this special permit for 48 hours, or is that just included in the Class A license?
That would just be included in the license rights. Currently, if a Class A club wanted to do an event, what they would have to do today is surrender their liquor license, get a temporary permit for $25 per day, and then purchase alcohol under that temporary permit and keep all of their alcohol separate. This simply allows them to do that with their existing liquor without getting a temporary permit from us, as long as they notify us electronically at least 48 hours prior to the event.
Is there a duration of time? I mean, is it for 24 hours, a special permit? for special consideration?
That would be subject to the terms of the contract between the Class A club and who's contracted with them to have their event there.
Thank you. Based on my inquiry, any questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would also direct the committee, there's written proponents from Joe Marville, American Legion, Post 153. Have time, please read that testimony. Anyone else wishing to testify on Senate Bill 126? Seeing none, I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 126, and I will open the hearing on House Bill 2403. Matt, if you would give us an overview.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. House Bill 2403 would enact the Community Defense Act. The legislation, the stated purpose of the act is to regulate sexually oriented businesses to promote the health, safety, and general welfare of the citizens of Kansas. Just kind of running through a few of the sections of the bill. Section 2 provides a number of definitions that are used in the act, including just the definition of sexually oriented business, which means an adult arcade, adult bookstore or adult video store, adult cabaret, adult motion picture theater, semi-nude model studio, a sexual device shop, or a sexual encounter center. So moving on to what the bill does, Section 3 would prohibit establishing a sexually oriented business within 1,000 feet of any pre-existing school, house of worship, state licensed daycare facility, public library or public park, residence, or other sexually oriented business. The prohibition in the bill would not apply to any existing business that was established prior to the enactment of the bill. Section 4 would prohibit nudity in a sexually oriented business. Semi-nudity would be prohibited in a sexually oriented business unless the employee remained on a fixed stage at least 6 feet from all patrons and at least 18 inches from the floor in a room of at least 600 square feet. No employee of a sexually oriented business would be permitted to touch a patron while they were semi-nude. Any business that displayed adult videos would be required to configure their premises so there was an unobstructed view from the operator's station to the interior of each viewing room. An operator would have to be on duty at all times. Any patron was on the premises. Sexually oriented businesses that did not have stages or interior configurations that met the requirements of the bill would have 180 days to comply. A sexually oriented business would be prohibited from operating between the hours of 12 a.m. and 6 a.m., prohibited from selling or allowing patrons to consume alcoholic beverages on the premises. Any violation of the act would constitute a Class C misdemeanor, and each day that a violation occurred would constitute a separate violation. It would be a defense to a violation for a supervisor of a sexually oriented business if they did not knowingly allow the violations to be committed or if they were unable to prevent the violation. And then Section 8 amends current law in KSA 223901 to make habitual violations of this act a common nuisance. So if a person is arrested for a common nuisance, the Attorney General, city, county, or district attorney can petition the court for a hearing to determine whether an unlawful activity has been occurring on that property. And then upon a final judgment that any property was used for the commission of a common nuisance, the court can order that a structure located on the property be closed and locked for a period of up to 2 years, and can also assess a civil penalty of up to $25,000. Be happy to try to answer questions the committee might have about the bill.
Thank you. Questions of the reviser? Yes, Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Matt, on page 2, it says sexually oriented businesses would be prohibited to, 1, from operating between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. What is current law?
I'm not sure there's a restriction right now. There's a restriction on liquor licenses, but I'd have to double check since we're not amending any existing law with that. I'm not sure what it is. I'll be happy to look into that though.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Carpenter?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm noticing there's a lot of new sections in here. So for instance, like the 1,000 feet rule from a church, that kind of stuff. None of that is currently in an existing law. Is that correct, Revisor?
That's correct. This is all this, with the exception of that one section that amends common nuisances. The remaining provisions are all new law.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions of the revisor? Yes, Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Revisor, in this legislation, if it were to be enacted, would it, if a local ordinance, whether it's a county or city ordinance, was more strict, would this overrule that, or would local control still be in play?
There's nothing in the legislation that pertains to or that preempts local ordinances. So there's not a clear prohibition. If there was a determination that this did preempt local ordinances, then that would be the case. But there's no statement in the bill saying that local municipalities cannot enact different provisions.
Further questions of the revisor? Seeing none, we'll move right along. We have a number of proponents. Each of them will be limited to 3 minutes. First up on the proponents section will be Phil Cosby, American Family Action. The vice chair will act as a timekeeper. She'll have a signal for when you have 30 seconds. Thank you. Good morning and welcome to Federal and State Affairs. The blue light on?
There's a red light on. Thank you.
Okay, red. Mine's blue.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Philip Cosby, American Family Action. I do stand in support of the Community Defense Act. This act has come before this very body before and enjoyed a success on the floor with a vote of 98 to 20 some in 2011. It did fail in the House with a 20 vote in 2011. Over the past 18 years, I've spoken to thousands of Kansans about the negative effects of sexually oriented businesses. These restrictions are well-worn paths as far as constitutionality and reasonable. Other states have adopted those. Missouri being the closest neighbor, this is identical to Missouri. All the restrictions that you see in this are also in Missouri law. It was upheld by the Missouri Supreme Court in a 9-0 unanimous decision. This body did pass a resolution a couple years ago. I'll read it about, be it resolved that we recognize pornography as a public health hazard that leads to a broad spectrum of individual and public health impacts and social harms. Be it further resolved that we recognize the need for additional education, prevention, research, policy change, and community and social levels. We urge this chamber and other government bodies to take appropriate steps to ensure progress is made. Signed, Speaker of the House, Ron Reichman. And the House Representatives and the Senate did pass this resolution. The House only had one member that objected to that. We all sense it. We all know the sexualization of our culture. We all know the tragedy of human trafficking. Attorney General Schmidt in his human trafficking bill on page 48 says, the interests of this state, including but not limited to mitigating the adverse secondary effects of sexually oriented businesses. If you're serious about trafficking, if you're serious about sexually transmitted diseases, blight, criminal activity, the inebriation of alcohol in these environments. This bill is sound and reasonable, and is certainly is time as a body to address these things as you state in your resolution. These are not anecdotal evidences. I have provided for you a 1,500 pages. You don't want to print it out. It's about 4 inches deep. 22 court cases that every appellate court has upheld these as constitutional and reasonable. There are evidences in those 1,500 pages of all the negative effects that occur. 3 minutes. Thank you. I stand for questions.
After I do all the proponents, then we'll have questions. Next up, Jeanette Pryor, Kansas Catholic Conference. Good morning and welcome to Federal and State Affairs.
Good morning, Chairman Barker and members of the committee. My name is Jeanette Pryor, and I'm the policy specialist for the Kansas Catholic Conference. It mattered especially to me to present the bishop's full support for the Community Defense Act because in 2018, I represented the conference as a member of the Freedom Now Task Force to end human trafficking here in Kansas. The coalition's goal was to develop a cross-disciplinary, multi-tooled blueprint to be used in all Kansas counties to confront this crisis of trafficking. The task of the demand panel on which I served was to identify the specific drivers for victim supply, and I'm sure that you won't be surprised that in studies, global studies, law enforcement, and social service testimony, everyone concurs that sexually oriented businesses not only directly drive the demand to purchase human beings, but they frequently serve as a crystallizing point for trafficking in communities. At the conference, we were simultaneously studying the Solidarity movement in Poland under St. John Paul II in the 1980s. And John Paul II continuously spoke of replacing his national system of slavery with what he called the civilization of life, or a culture of love. And for him, the heart of any truly human civilization is recognizing the radical dignity of each human person, unrepeatable and irreplaceable. And the first commandment for any human civilization is to never use another person as an object for one's own purposes or pleasure. If passed, the Community Defense Act will not only curtail businesses that significantly harm their local communities and destabilize our families, but it will disrupt an industry of the culture of death that is predicated precisely on the buying and selling of other human beings as objects. And I ask you to please support this bill when it comes to a vote. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, I'm probably terrible at this. Asna Saul. And please correct me when you get up here. I'm just terrible with names. And welcome to Federal and State Affairs.
Thank you, Chairman Barker and members of the committee. That was perfect. You said it perfectly. My name is Hasna Sal. I am a public art artist and a architect. I have created the first memorial, the first exterior memorial in this nation on human trafficking, for the victims of human trafficking and for those who minister to them. It was a work that I did pro bono for the past 2 years. Why did I do this work? Missouri ranks 7th in the nation, and Kansas ranks 15th in our nation for human trafficking. It is the second largest and fastest growing crime in the world, and the children ages 11 to 13, that is the average age of a child who gets trapped into trafficking. Why? Because of poverty, addiction, and trafficking. So over the past 2 years, I just happened to come across a survivor, and through her, many other survivors who are essentially, their stories are the same. It keeps repeating itself. These children are born into low-income housing with abusive parents or absentee parents, and they go through this process of isolation, and then they get into the wrong hands. What are these wrong hands? Many times I'm seeing that it is these sexually oriented businesses that are luring them through recruits. There are older girls and boys in these establishments who then lure the younger girls, the younger children. I have a child of my own. I know what his mental judgment level is like at this age. 11 to 13 years, these children are getting recruited, and then before you know it, they are trapped in their low wages, long hours. I have spoken to survivors myself where they have said that they have been caught in the system, and for whatever reason, some hand of God that has brought them out. Less than 1% of the victims make it out alive, less than 1%. And so I speak today in front of you on behalf of them, on behalf of those who have lost their lives, who are losing their lives, and who will continue to lose their lives. But these sexually oriented businesses like massage parlors and clubs, they are propagating this crime, this heinous crime. And Independence Avenue used to be such a place. Right now, my second project is in the works for being built on Independence Avenue. But that was, I think 20 years back, the second highest, largest crime street in the country. So at least Missouri is taking an aggressive stand, and I hope my state, Kansas, will as well. Thank you.
Next up, Scott Berghold on WebEx. Scott?
Yes. Thank you,
Please.
Chairman and members. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Scott Berghold. I'm an attorney that works almost exclusively in the area of adult entertainment and sexually oriented business regulation. I've represented cities, towns, and counties around the country in approximately 23 states, and was the lead attorney for the state of Missouri in the defense of their Community Defense Act, which is basically a mirror image of HB 2403, the bill before you today. As Mr. Cosby recognized, that after we litigated that vigorously, the Missouri Supreme Court unanimously upheld that law is constitutional, largely because it mirrors laws around the country that have been upheld by both state and federal courts. And in 3 minutes, I won't have time to share with you my entire presentation. I'm leaving a copy of it with Ms. Bonner for the committee to review. But if I can at this time, I'd like to share my screen and put that presentation up before you, because I want to highlight a couple of the items in that presentation. And that is that the Supreme Court has held that local governments and state governments can stringently regulate the time, the place, and the manner of adult business operations. They cannot be totally banned from a jurisdiction or from a community, but they can be stringently regulated according to the Supreme Court's guidelines. So whether it's the Ocello case, which was the Missouri Supreme Court case, or Enlightened Reading, which was a federal case out of Kansas City that upheld the Jackson County, Missouri ordinance that's very similar to the bill before you, there is a well-worn path that cities and towns and states can follow in regulating adult entertainment. The courts have recognized, going all the way back to 1986, which was the key U.S. Supreme Court case on this, Renton versus Playtime Theaters, that legislatures can be proactive to prevent secondary effects from happening in the future, that they can rely upon any evidence that's reasonably believed to be relevant. In the 1,500 pages of documentation before you, there are studies done by PhDs and trained criminologists, but there also are land use studies done by local agencies and departments, and crime impact studies compiled by police departments. All of those types of evidence are the types that the Supreme Court has said that a governmental body such as this can rely upon. And that the government
Scott, 30 seconds.
Yes, the government is given leeway to address negative secondary effects. I want to just go real quickly to page 15 of the presentation. This is an article from the Wichita Eagle that talked about sexual trafficking in Wichita. And at the bottom of the page, it says, this is from a law enforcement officer telling us that they're exploited through strip clubs, pornography, and escort services. And this is what this is what the sergeant said, Mike Nagy said, amateur nights at strip clubs are big on those nights. They get lax on checking IDs, and they're able to traffic women, and as our prior speaker said, lure them in to these environments where they are trafficked. That's been found in multiple studies and in court cases. I'm available for questions for the committee.
Thank you, counsel. And if you'll remain on the line for questions. Next up is Sheriff Calvin Hayden, Sheriff of Johnson County, Kansas. Sheriff, are you on the line?
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. My name is Calvin Hayden. I am the current sheriff of Johnson County, Kansas, and we have a population of about 610,000 people as of this year. And in my jurisdiction, we have 2 of these clubs. I fail to call them cabaret clubs or exotic dancers. They're nothing more than strip clubs. In the last year, I had our numbers pull for what kind of resources we have to invest and send to these. Last year, we've had 162 calls at the clubs themselves. These crimes include drug dealing, money seizures, batteries, aggravated batteries, criminal damage to property, thefts. This doesn't include the driving while intoxicated arrests that have been made several miles away from these facilities, or the batteries that occur when people return to their homes, the domestic violence, the human trafficking, all of the, and I'll call them dark crimes that accompany these facilities. Now, I've been involved in law enforcement for about 34 years, and I've personally closed these clubs when we had felons in possession of firearms. We've tried through our county resolutions to enforce violations of our county resolutions. What happens here is it goes to a codes court, and they may get a $50 fine, and we spend hours and hours of police work for that. You may be surprised who owns some of these clubs. One is several members of a very famous sports team here in Kansas City, and the other is a family trust of some very rich people. It boggles my mind how people want to profit off of these clubs, and I'm sure there's a lobbyist sitting out there somewhere that wants to testify in favor of these things. He's making money out of G-strings. And I'm sorry, that is not what we stand up for and the things we do. We've tried to regulate them any way we can, anyhow we can, and we come into resistance, whether it's from county codes or sometimes our district attorney's office. Any way you can help us give some regulation here would be a great benefit, especially to us law enforcement officers who are struggling at times to deal with all these addictions, whether it's drugs, sexual addictions, alcohol, domestic violence, all the things that spin off of these clubs. We could use any help we get. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you. And stand for questions.
Thank you, Sheriff. That's the only proponents that I have who submitted testimony. I have a Robin Potter, but she did not submit any testimony, nor is she on WebEx, is she? She is not. Strike that one. Anyone else appearing as a proponent? Seeing none, I will close that segment of the bill and open up the opponents. Phil Bradley with the Kansas Licensed Beverage Association. Phil, are you on the line? Oh, excuse me, before I do that, questions? Yes, Representative Heiberger, direct your question.
I have a revisor question, if that's permissible.
Revisor, yes.
This legislation applies to any establishment, not just an establishment with a drinking establishment license. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question. Could it?
The way I read this, it applies to any establishment, whether or not they have a drinking establishment license?
Correct. Yeah, any sexually oriented business.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Sheriff Hayden.
Go ahead and ask.
All right. Sorry, I didn't know if he could hear me or not. So my question is this. I'd be curious to see a comparison of crime numbers prior to COVID and after COVID, because just wanted to see if any, and also if any of the shutdowns affected these businesses at all. It's my guess that there might be a growing trend where people are less likely to do these sorts of in-person activities, but obviously you would be more privy to that information and those numbers than I would. So curious to hear that. Thank you.
Sheriff, did you get the question?
Yes, I did. And interestingly enough, our call load didn't hardly change at all. I had those questions myself. In fact, they have been pretty consistent from year to year. So I was curious about that too, to see if they would pick up or go down. I know people are under a lot of stress right now, and sometimes they look for different ways to relieve that stress. But we've had not much of a change in the last several years, man.
Thank you. Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question's also for Sheriff Hayden. We heard from several proponents, including yourself, that you support this bill because you want to regulate these businesses, though this bill doesn't apply to any existing businesses. And so just wondering if there's a huge market for an increase in these types of businesses in Johnson County, and that's why you're supporting the bill, since it doesn't do anything for the existing facilities.
Well, and you're right, but a lot of the two facilities we've got are grandfathered in, but there's also a huge increase in our population in Johnson County, and if the opportunity is there, I'm sure that they will take advantage of it. So we want to prevent any more of these nuisances in our county if we can.
Thank you. If we have the opportunity to work this bill, I will have several amendments, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other questions. I will close the proponent section of the bill and open up the opponent section. I have one listed opponent, Philip Bradley with the Kansas Licensed Beverage Association. Are you on the line?
Yes, I am, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee, and thank you for allowing me to appear online. And I appreciate the time limitations, and understand I will take no more than the proponents took. I believe I'm the only opponent. In the time limitations we've had, I was encouraged by all folks on the opposition side to represent them. I am Philip Bradley. I represent not only the Equal Entertainment Group, which is a small subsection of those folks who serve legal alcohol in the state of Kansas. That includes hotels, clubs, venues, caterers, bars, all of those groups. And I'd like to take some time addressing what some of the proponents say, and I'll do that in just a second. First, I wanted to say that mostly what I'm hearing the folks talking in favor of this bill are items that either are not covered by this bill or not about the subject of the operation of these establishments. I've not been able to find any direct links of operation of these establishments with any of the crimes or attitudes or human trafficking, or especially not pornography, which by Kansas law, these clubs are not pornographic. That's confusing the issue here. This issue is about the operation of existing clubs. It's this ordinance would address in more of a zoning type regulation about hours of operation. As you were told, this regulation would be also, they didn't really talk about it much, but it takes alcohol out of these clubs. It makes it illegal to serve alcohol, which is one of the biggest concerns. In my opinion, this is a massive state regulation and law expansion looking for a problem that either doesn't exist or is being addressed by local ordinances. And I am sympathetic with anyone who has a reason that their county doesn't want any more new of these establishments. And actually, Johnson County has regulations to prohibit opening any new of these types of establishments. So it's probably going to be impossible to do there, as does Wyandotte, as does several others. Sedgwick, many of the counties across the state of Kansas have already addressed this issue. And many of the cities have done the same. Many cities have outlawed them or made them, regulated them to certain areas. Now
30 seconds left.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, am I limited to 3 minutes as well since I'm sole opposition?
No, I'm going to give you 6 minutes.
Thank you.
Half the time that I gave the other folks. Please
Thank
go forward.
This bill has appeared several times. There is a large packet of information we've given to you. Every time it has appeared, the legislature in their wisdom has decided that local groups are dealing with this issue as they stand. And the question as to whether or not they would supersede is still unclear because it is not addressed directly in this ordinance. Whether or not you would lose your ordinances that you have in, say, Wyandotte County by applying these. So I would ask the legislators to consider the actual facts in the information I gave you. There's 3 different reports directly about the state of Kansas, calling law enforcement officers, calling real estate valuation county officers, calling health officials in each county, addressing what the proponents say are the problems, and with actual answers from the cities and counties where these places occurred. And I will certainly stand for questions. And thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
You, questions for Mr. Bradley? Looking to my left. Seeing none, thank you, sir. There were no questions. Anyone else wishes to appear as an opponent? Seeing none, I will close. There's no neutrals listed. Anyone appearing as a neutral? Seeing none, I will close the hearing on House Bill 2403. At this time, Representative Ken wishes to make a comment to the committee, and I'm going to ask that you come down front. Again, Representative, I know you have the gift of gab. I'm going to limit you to 3 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for this opportunity. And the distinguished members of the committee, this legislation that I would like to propose today deals with childhood gun safety education. I'm proposing a reworking of House Bill 2773, which was introduced and passed as amended out on the House Appropriations Committee back on March 20th of 2018. House Bill 2773 was vigorously debated on the House floor March 27th, about a week later, and it was overwhelmingly passed out of the Kansas House with 119 yeas and 5 nays. This proposed legislation that I have here basically retains that same language that was already negotiated before and passed out of the committee and the chamber, and it's very straightforward. It has 5 points. Number 1, it's not mandatory. What it does is it empowers the State Board of Education when they receive a request from the local education or school boards to receive this gun safety training for their students. It empowers them to have that curriculum created in accordance with the NRA's Eddie the Eagle gun safety program, or education that is based upon that, or any subsequent program that is provided. It also has it on grade appropriate level for grades K through 5, and again middle school 6 through 8, and then again for high school. The only other thing that you would see in this proposed legislation, Mr. Chairman, is that there's a piece for the wildlife parks and recreation to also offer hunter safety training as well. The last piece of this is that the amendment or I'm sorry, that the bill would be called the Royale Act. We had the opportunity last week to discuss a few of those reasons why, and if you would allow me the time, I would like to reiterate those comments. About a month ago, I had the opportunity and was approached by a constituent of some of our distinguished representatives to come and speak with her concerning a loss that she had in her household. Met with her, her name was Miss Sunny Smith. You're familiar with her story of tragedy. Many of you know the deep loss that she suffered, and her family and the Wichita community, when her young 9-year-old son went over for a sleepover. Two kids found a gun that was loaded, and they played with it, and they did not practice that gun safety. Her young son, Royale, was lost. Because of that, she has been on a mission to try to find some sense of solace. I strongly believe, Mr. Chairman, that this particular bill would allow us to come alongside Ms. Smith in strength and honor and respect both the memory of her son, but also provide against any future loss of life of our children. And with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you have the revisor draft?
Mr. Chairman, we did. The revisor has it, and Ms. Connie, I passed it out to her this morning.
Okay. Connie will pass this out. Or Jeannie, one of the two. Matt, are you on the line?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
While this is being passed out, can you give us an overview?
Certainly. I would say Representative Penn described all the aspects of it, but it would basically create a new section that would require, well, I should say, the Board of Education of a school district could provide firearms safety education programs. If they chose to, it would standardize the curriculum guidelines for those programs. And then it breaks down based off of that age kind of, for K through 5, the program would be based on the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program. For grades 6 through 8 would also be based on the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program, or the Hunter Education in Our Schools program offered by Wildlife Parks and Tourism. And then for students in grades 9 through 12, it would be based on the Hunter Education in Our Schools program offered by Wildlife and Parks. So if the Board of Education elected to provide firearms safety education, that instruction would be in accordance with those requirements. And then the school district would have to ensure that all students were provided the opportunity to take the course. And then, as Representative Penn indicated, the section would be known as the Royale Act.
Thank you. Representative Clayton, you have a question of the revisor?
Yes, or just a procedural question, because I'm just trying to figure out what's going on here. Okay. I don't recall this bill being introduced, although I know we've heard it in previous bienniums in this committee before, but walk us through exactly what's happening here, because I thought usually the procedure is to introduce a bill and then that bill gets read in, but what are we doing here? Let
me explain it to you.
Okay.
The representative last week attempted an amendment on a bill that was found to be not germane. I have a bill in our committee. It's called 2089, if you recall. We stripped it out and put it in the other bill, which was 2059. So this is what's often called a shell. And I think what the representative is proposing is that we take 2089, which is empty of any contents, and he wishes to place his contents in this bill. Should we do that, it will be House substitute for House Bill 2089. And may I finish my explanation before I ask the question? Or
why aren't we having a hearing on it, though? Don't you think we should? It could potentially be good legislation, but I think more input from the community would be of value to all members of the committee, opponents or proponents.
Well, one, we have 12 days left. This was vetted on the floor of the House, although it was found to be not germane. We have had this bill before, as you recall. I think you were on Fed and State.
Yes, but not all the members were.
And this is a procedure within the rules when you have an empty bill or a shell. I think that's the best explanation I can give to you, where he's proceeding within the rules. We do this a number of times. You've been here a number of years, how we work bills at the latter part. But it is an empty bill. It's in this committee. I could take any Senate bill and put in it, or I could put any other contents of any bills in it. And then it goes to the floor of the House should the committee pass it out. And then it would be germane to, or you would be able to amend it if you so desire. But
Well, I will say that just because we can doesn't mean, you know, we have had hearings in the past.
I understand,
with different
Representative, and if you do not like the procedure, you have a vote in this committee.
I know.
Representative Heiberger.
I just want to be clear. Are we working 2089 now? Is that?
There may be a motion to do that.
Okay.
That's not up to me. I would not make the motion. I just explained the procedures. Representative Potter. Your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to comment on, since I was the one who called the germaneness on it on the floor, that I am much happier working this in committee, and I appreciate you taking it because it is a good bill.
And I think the representative would admit that when he brought it to me, I told him it wasn't germane when we were on the floor. But if germaneness is not called, then it's not a problem. But as a former rules chair, I gave him my best advice. And
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Out to be correct. Anyways, Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the representative.
Yes, go right ahead.
All right, and just to refresh my memory and those who were here before, and perhaps to educate those who were not here before, when we talk about hunter safety, that's pretty self-explanatory. We talk about the Eddie Eagle program. If I recall, that's what it entails basically is if you find it, you're telling the children, don't touch, run away, report it. That's right. Okay. Want to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Miller. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question of the representative, if I may.
You may.
This is an exempt committee. Every day we meet, we begin our proceedings with, are there bill introductions? Why is it you have not requested the committee introduce this bill before today?
Before today, it was going up as an amendment. You've heard the discussion. And before today, this is something that I would like to bring to the body. As far as it being a bill with its own RS and things of that nature, I could do that just as easily, but the chairman has spoken on what his procedure will be.
Well, actually, you could still ask for a bill introduction. Are you following this process because you're somehow afraid of a full-blown hearing and the criticism that might come from that?
Sir, did 20 years in the Army, I'm not afraid of a hearing. Thank you.
Well, then, again, I repeat my question, why not introduce it in the ordinary course of things and approach it in the conventional committee process?
And, sir, I repeat my answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? Hoyt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am familiar with Royale's law as a safe storage law. So I am curious, has Royale's family specifically requested this bill, which has been heard and has been out there for a couple years, to be Royale's Act? Because again, there's information out there that it's actually a different bill.
I am not familiar with any other bill that has been initiated or asked by the family. I met with Royale's mother and assured her that I would bring awareness to her situation, and that's what I am attempting to do with this bill and with the previous amendment.
So following up on that,
Yes.
the family is aware that this is what is being named Royale's Act versus the Safe Gun Storage Bill.
I am not familiar with any gun storage bill legislation that has been proposed, so I can't speak to that. But I will speak to the fact that the mother is looking, my coordination with her was to observe whenever it is that we're discussing this, both last week and today. So she is quite aware and approves of this particular namesake being done for her son. And thank you for the question.
Thank you. Second time, Representative Clayton.
Thank you. I actually have a question for the revisor or any staff that could answer this. I don't have this in front of me because I didn't, come prepared for this because I didn't know it was going to happen. But can we pull up any similar past legislation that we have heard so that we could see a fiscal note on this? Again, just as appropriators, it always makes sense if we're going to take a vote, we need to know how much it costs.
Matt?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, did you call on me? I don't have that offhand. I'd be happy to look that up real quick and see if I can find something.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, I'm just looking at paragraph 3. It says grades 9 through 12 shall be based upon hunter education in our school programs offered by the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism. You know, I've been an instructor for hunter safety for the last 20 or 23 years in my county. It's a good program. I think it's important that young people learn about guns, particularly if there's guns in their home. I always secure my weapons at home, and I never worried about my kids, but I worried about their friends coming over because their parents may have never taught them anything about firearms. So I'm familiar with that program. But based upon that, I see no further questions. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you, sir.
Turn to your seat. As to House Bill 2089, what is the pleasure of the committee? Representative Arnberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that we pass out House Bill 2089 favorably for passage.
Well, that's an improper motion. Maybe I'll clarify this. You will have to, I've opened up 2089. You could make a motion to do a House substitute for House 2089.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize. I move that we pass out House Bill 2089, substitute with the language in front of us. Does that count as a?
That would be fine.
Okay. Favorably for passage.
And that would make it House substitute for House Bill 2089. Is that a second? Sir? Let me get a second. Second would be Representative Penn. Open discussion, Representative Heiberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to challenge the germaneness of the substitute motion.
Thank you. It is denied. We're in committee. I make the determinations. It was a gun bill. It is now a gun training bill. It is germane. Further questions on discussion? Representative? Yes, Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as was brought to my attention, will there be availability for amendments on this?
I'm sorry?
Will there be an available time, if we're working this right now, for people, if they don't have amendments?
If you have amendments, please bring them forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And you'll also be given that an opportunity on the floor of the House, should this be brought above the line. I have a motion and a second to put the language that were proposed in the House Bill 2089, which is open, and to make it House substitute for House Bill 2089. Representative Miller. Discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've always respected the way you ran this committee. I've always respected the candor that you approached our deliberations, notifying us in advance what matters we would be considering. I've always respected the following of the committee process and the times that members of my party have been chastised for not following the committee process. What we're doing now is possible under the rules, as was noted earlier, but is not what I consider to be what we have in mind when we talk about the committee process. I cannot express in words the level of disappointment that I have today in what we're doing, and I do not understand why. I do not understand why something with some merit cannot be introduced in the conventional way, and we have hearings scheduled with parties appearing both for and against the bill when this is an exempt committee and we have plenty of time to work the bill. I am extremely disappointed in you. I'm extremely disappointed in those making the motion, and I'll be extremely disappointed in anyone that votes in favor of the motion that they think somehow this is the way we need.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. The distinguished representative says that.
You do not have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've made my point. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would agree with you in part. This was unexpected procedural, and maybe you should have been notified, or I should have given a day. And you've been very persuasive. I'm going to hold this until tomorrow to allow other members, not because of your persuasive argument, because of my ranking member's persuasive argument. Don't want to give you any credit. But I think that's a reasonable request. When the ranking member brought up there may be amendments, I think it's fair. And so I'm going to put this as Representative Sawyer and I on the Rules Committee once had to do. We're going to push the pause button for 24 hours. But you will see this again tomorrow. But that will give you an opportunity to confer with the reviser, propose any amendments you have, and we will then finish working the bill, and whether or not we pass it out favorably, we'll have to wait until the vote. Does that make my ranking member happy? I don't really care if it makes you happy, my ranking member happy. So that's what we're going to do. So with that, I have pushed the pause button. This bill will be open for debate tomorrow. I want to make sure that that's taken care of first. The record reflects that. You have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the representative behind me was actually first. But I have an easy question, and that is, I know that this action came up in 2018, and I'm pretty sure there was a fiscal note attached to it at that time, and I wondered if the reviser could get that information for us between now and tomorrow so we could just be aware of the fiscal note.
We can ask them to do that. I would add that when the amendment arrived at the floor, I noticed that my friends from the other side did not raise germaneness. In fact, many of them indicated they thought it was a good amendment to the bill. This is just an educational opportunity. It is not mandating anything. So I thought it would be less controversial. But now that I find that it is, or it may not be tomorrow, just giving ample time for you to do your research. So we'll take it up tomorrow. Representative Penn, do you have a comment?
No.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just process-wise, are we just going to go right into working it? Is there going to be a hearing?
There will go right into working it. All right?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Representative Howe?
Revisor Sterling, Matt?
Yes, Matt, go ahead.
If I can, just to answer the question quickly, Representative Epley is correct. This bill was introduced in 2018. It was House Bill 2460. There was a fiscal note. The Department of Education indicated that it would require additional expenditures of $2,500 for travel and per diem expenditures for its staff to meet with school administrators for input on curriculum guidelines.
Could you get a copy of that to the Connie so she can
Sure,
get it out
certainly.
to
I'll
committee?
send it to Connie now.
Thank you. I had a question over here. Oh, Representative Howell, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I had a parliamentary question.
Yes, sir.
There was a motion. It received a second. There hasn't been a vote on that, so will that just be tabled till tomorrow? Is that what you're...
It will be held until tomorrow. We do this many times if we run out of time on committee. That's not the circumstances here. The bill is open. We've had a motion to pass it out and make it a House substitute for House Bill 2084. There's been a second. We're still in the discussion phase, and we will take that up tomorrow morning. Is that helpful?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I just didn't know if there needed to be a motion to table it till tomorrow.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
No, not the table, because once it's tabled, then we have to wait and go through another procedural matter. And because time is always not on our side, many times when we're working a bill, we'll have to just continue it until the next day. Anything else from committee? Thank you very much. It'll be an interesting day tomorrow.